Karen Washington looked at her watch and smiled. She was early for her flight to San Francisco. She walked through the airport with confidence in her dark blue business suit and rolling carry-on bag. At 38 years old, Karen had worked hard to become a marketing executive at one of Chicago's top firms. This business trip was important. She would present her new campaign to potential clients who could bring millions to her company. Karen had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. She saved her airline points for a long time to get a first-class ticket on Skyline Airways. After 15 years of flying with them, she had earned platinum status. Karen liked the extra space in first class where she could work on her presentation during the 4-hour flight. The boarding area was busy with travelers. Karen waited patiently as the gate agent called for first-class passengers to board. She showed her boarding pass and walked down the jet bridge feeling good about the trip ahead. When Karen stepped onto the plane, the flight attendant at the door greeted her with a quick smile. "Welcome aboard," she said, though her eyes didn't quite meet Karen's. Karen found her seat, 3A, a window seat in the third row. She put her small suitcase in the overhead bin and sat down. Karen took out her phone to send a quick text to her assistant back in Chicago. As she typed, she felt someone watching her. She looked up and saw a middle-aged white man in a gray suit staring at her from across the aisle. When their eyes met, he quickly looked away. Karen ignored this and went back to her message. More passengers filed onto the plane. The first-class cabin was almost full when a flight attendant with a name tag that read Heather Boyd stopped at Karen's row. She had blonde hair pulled back tightly and wore the blue and gold Skyline Airways uniform. "Excuse me, ma'am, could I see your boarding pass?" Heather asked loudly. Several nearby passengers turned to look. Karen reached into her purse and pulled out her boarding pass. "Here you go," she said politely, though she was confused. No one else had been asked to show their boarding pass after already being seated. Heather took the boarding pass and studied it with narrowed eyes. She looked at Karen, then back at the paper. "One moment, please," she said before walking away with Karen's boarding pass. Karen felt uncomfortable as other passengers watched. She had flown first class many times before, but had never been questioned like this. She tried to focus on her phone, pretending not to notice the stares. A few minutes later, Heather returned with an older man wearing a senior flight attendant uniform. His name tag said Sam Peters. "Ma'am, there seems to be a problem with your seating assignment," Sam said, his voice firm but quiet. "We need this seat for another passenger with higher priority status." Karen blinked in surprise. "But I have a confirmed first-class ticket that I booked months ago," she explained calmly. "I'm also a platinum member with Skyline. I've been flying with you for 15 years. Sam's expression didn't change. "I understand, but we need to reseat you. There's an available seat in economy class." By now, the plane was almost fully boarded. Passengers in economy class were passing by, and many slowed down to watch what was happening. Karen felt her cheeks grow warm with embarrassment. "Can you explain why I'm being moved?" Karen asked. "My ticket clearly shows I'm assigned to this seat, and I paid for first class with my points." Instead of answering, Sam looked at Heather and gave a small nod. Heather picked up the phone near the galley. Within minutes, 2 security officers appeared at the front of the plane. "What's going on?" Karen asked, her voice steady despite her rising anxiety. "I haven't done anything wrong. I just want to understand why I'm being removed from my assigned seat." The security officers approached her row. "Ma'am, we need you to gather your belongings and come with us," the taller officer said. Karen looked around at the other passengers, hoping someone would speak up for her. A few people looked uncomfortable, but no one said anything. She noticed a young woman a few rows back discreetly recording with her phone. "I don't understand," Karen said, still keeping her voice level. "Can someone please explain what rule I've broken? If you don't comply, we'll have to remove you from the aircraft entirely," Sam said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Karen knew she had no choice. Making a scene would only make things worse. With dignity, she stood up and retrieved her suitcase from the overhead bin. As she collected her things, she noticed the man who had been staring at her earlier talking quietly with Heather. She heard him say, Thanks for taking care of it, Heather. As Karen moved toward the exit, escorted by the security officers, she glanced back and saw the man, whose name she would later learn was Greg Miller, being ushered by Heather into the seat Karen had just vacated. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Miller," Heather said warmly. Karen was led through the terminal, her professional demeanor hiding the storm of emotions inside. Once they reached the gate area, the security officers left her there without explanation. Lisa Price, the gate agent, looked confused. "Weren't you already boarded?" "I was removed from my seat," Karen explained, her voice finally betraying a slight tremor. "They said it was needed for someone with higher priority, but I'm a platinum member and had a confirmed first-class ticket." Lisa checked her computer. "I don't see any note about why you were removed. This is unusual." She typed a few more things. "The flight is completely full now, and it's the last one to San Francisco today. The best I can do is book you on tomorrow morning's flight." Karen thought about her presentation scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. "I need to get to San Francisco today. My business meeting is important." "I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do," Lisa said, looking genuinely apologetic. "All other flights to San Francisco today are fully booked. Skyline will provide a hotel voucher for tonight." Through the window, Karen watched as her flight pushed back from the gate. She felt a mixture of humiliation, anger, and disbelief. In 15 years of flying, nothing like this had ever happened to her. She found a quiet corner of the terminal and called her brother, Marcus Washington, who worked as a civil rights attorney in Philadelphia. "Marcus, you won't believe what just happened," she said when he answered. As she explained the situation, Marcus listened carefully. "Karen, this sounds like clear discrimination," he said when she finished. "Document everything while it's fresh, in your memory. Names, times, exactly what was said. Did anyone witness this?" "The whole first-class cabin," Karen replied. "And I think someone was recording it." "Good," Marcus said. "I hate that this happened to you, but we're not going to let them get away with it." Karen ended the call and then, after a moment's hesitation, opened her social media app. Her hands shook slightly as she began recording a video of herself. "I need to share something that just happened to me," she began, her voice steady despite her emotions. "I was just removed from my first-class seat on Skyline Airways Flight 372 to San Francisco." As she spoke into her phone, Karen had no idea that her next few minutes of testimony would spark a movement, trigger a corporate crisis, and ultimately cost Skyline Airways $500 million overnight. She was simply a woman seeking justice for being treated unfairly. But sometimes one person's story is all it takes to expose a deeper problem that has been ignored for too long. Karen finished her video, took a deep breath, and pressed post. Within minutes, the first comments began to appear. Within hours, her story would reach millions. By morning, it would change everything. Karen's video spread faster than she ever imagined. She sat in the airport hotel room that night, watching her phone light up with notifications. The 4-minute video she had posted just hours ago now had over 50,000 views. She read through some of the comments. "This happened to me on Skyline last year. We need to boycott this airline. I'm canceling my flight with them right now." Karen had not expected this level of response. She was just a marketing executive who wanted to share her unfair treatment. Now people she didn't know were messaging her with support and their own stories. At 9:30 p.m., her phone rang. It was her brother Marcus. "Karen, your video is everywhere," he said. "A reporter from National News Network just called me asking for an interview with you. Are you watching the comments? There's someone who was on your flight who recorded the whole thing." Karen quickly searched through the comments and found the one Marcus mentioned. A woman named Alicia Rodriguez had replied to Karen's post with a link to her own video. Karen clicked on it and watched. Alicia had captured everything from her seat, 5 rows behind Karen. The video clearly showed Heather and Sam questioning Karen, then calling security. It showed Karen calmly asking for an explanation and being ignored. Most importantly, it showed Greg Miller being moved into Karen's seat right after she left. "This is unbelievable," Karen said. "She got it all on video." "This is exactly what we need," Marcus replied. "That video has already been shared thousands of times. NNN wants you on their morning show tomorrow. I think you should do it. Karen thought about it. She was supposed to be in San Francisco for her presentation, not on national television talking about discrimination. But maybe this was more important. Okay, she said. I'll do it. The next morning, Karen sat in the NNN studio in Chicago. She wore the same blue business suit from yesterday since she hadn't planned to stay in Chicago. The makeup artist had just finished getting her ready for the camera. The show's host, Jordan Matthews, walked over to introduce himself. "Thank you for coming in, Ms. Washington," Jordan said, shaking her hand. "Your story has touched a nerve. With a lot of people. Our phone lines haven't stopped ringing since we announced you would be on the show." Karen nodded. "I'm still trying to understand why it happened to me." "Well, let's try to get some answers," Jordan said as a producer counted down to airtime. The red light on the camera turned on. Jordan faced the viewers at home. "Good morning, America. Today we're talking with Karen Washington, whose video about being removed from her first-class seat on Skyline Airways has now been viewed over 2 million times. Karen, thank you for joining us." Karen told her story again, this time to a national audience. She spoke clearly and calmly, explaining what happened without anger in her voice. "I just want an explanation and an apology," she said. "This isn't about money. It's about dignity and respect. No one should be treated that way." Jordan nodded. "We invited Skyline Airways to send a representative to respond, but they declined. They did send this statement, which I'll read now. Skyline Airways is investigating the incident involving Ms. Washington. We take all passenger concerns seriously and will provide more information once our investigation is complete." Karen shook her head slightly. "That doesn't address what happened at all." "No, it doesn't," Jordan agreed. "We've been receiving calls all morning from other passengers with similar stories about Skyline. It seems this may not be an isolated incident." By the time Karen left, the studio, Flying While Black and Yarn Boycott Skyline were the top trending topics online. Celebrities with millions of followers were sharing her story. Civil rights organizations were issuing statements. Karen's phone rang. It was her boss, Paul Franklin. "Karen, I just saw you on NNN," he said. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she answered. "But I missed my flight to San Francisco. I won't be able to make the presentation today." "Don't worry about that," Paul said, surprising her. "The client called me this morning. They saw your video too. They've canceled their contract with Skyline Airways and want to reschedule our meeting for next week here in Chicago. They said they don't want to support a company that treats people that way." Karen felt relieved, but also amazed at how quickly things were happening. "Thank you for understanding, Paul. Of course, take the rest of the week off if you need it. And Karen, I'm sorry that happened to you." After hanging up, Karen checked her social media again. Alicia Rodriguez's video now had over 5 million views. News websites had picked up the story, with headlines like, "Black executive ejected from first class without cause," and social media rallies behind woman removed from flight. Karen's phone rang again. This time it was a number she didn't recognize. "Hello, this is Karen Washington," she answered. "Ms. Washington, my name is Ben Howard. I'm calling from the office of Congressman William Jones. The congressman has seen your video and would like to speak with you about your experience. He's on the Transportation Committee and is very concerned about what happened." Before Karen could respond, she got a notification for another call coming in. Then another. Then another. Lawyers offering to represent her. Journalists requesting interviews. Civil rights leaders wanting to meet her. Meanwhile, across town in the Skyline Airways headquarters, chaos was unfolding. Richard Bennett, the CEO, had called an emergency meeting with his executive team. "How bad is it?" he asked Linda Coleman, his PR director. Linda looked stressed. Her normally neat hair was messy, like she'd been running her hands through it. "It's bad. Really bad. We've had over 30,000 flight cancellations since yesterday. Our call centers can't keep up. Our social media accounts are being flooded with angry messages." Nancy Rivera, the CFO, spoke next. "Our stock price has dropped 18% since market opening. If this continues, we're looking at hundreds of millions in losses." Richard rubbed his forehead. And what about the incident itself? What actually happened? The head of operations, Jack Morris, cleared his throat. We've spoken with the flight crew. The flight attendant, Heather Boyd, claims she was following procedure for a double-booked seat. Was the seat double-booked? Richard asked. Jack looked uncomfortable. No, we've checked the system. Ms. Washington's booking was completely valid. She had proper priority as a platinum member. Then why was she removed? Richard demanded. Jack hesitated. We've discovered that Greg Miller, the man who took her seat, is a friend of Heather Boyd's husband. They play golf together. It appears Heather was doing him a personal favor. The room fell silent. Richard's face turned red with anger. You're telling me we're facing a public relations disaster and millions in losses because a flight attendant wanted to do a favor for her husband's golf buddy? No one answered. They didn't need to. Outside the conference room, employees gathered in small groups, watching the news on their phones and whispering nervously. They had all seen Karen's video. They had all read the comments. They knew this was not going to go away easily. By evening, Skyline's stock had fallen 27%. Their boycott Skyline had been used over 1 million times. Celebrities were publicly canceling their Skyline credit cards. Business partners were releasing statements distancing themselves from the airline. As Karen sat in her apartment that night, looking at all the messages of support, she wondered how a simple request to keep her assigned seat had turned into a national conversation about race, respect, and corporate responsibility. She had no idea that by morning things would get even bigger, and Skyline Airways would face the most expensive crisis in its history. Richard Bennett's phone rang at 3:17 a.m. He fumbled in the dark to answer it, his mind still cloudy with sleep. Richard, it's Linda. You need to turn on your TV right now. Richard sat up in bed, turning on the lamp as his wife Patricia groaned and pulled the covers over her head. What's happening? He asked, reaching for the remote. Asian markets just opened. Our stock is in free fall. We've lost over $400 million in value already, and it's still dropping. Richard clicked on the financial news channel. The headline at the bottom of the screen made his stomach drop. Skyline Airways crisis deepens. Stock plunges 42% in Asian markets. I'll be at the office in 30 minutes, he said, already getting out of bed. By 4 a.m., the Skyline Airways executive boardroom was filled with tired, worried faces. Nancy Rivera, the CFO, was showing slides with terrifying red downward arrows. This is unprecedented, she said. We're looking at a loss of over $500 million in market value in less than 24 hours. Our partners are pulling out. 7 major corporations have already suspended their business travel contracts with us. Hotel chains are calling to cut ties. This is what people are now calling a brand extinction event. The executives looked at each other in stunned silence. Skyline Airways had been in business for 32 years. It had weathered economic downturns, fuel crises, and terrorist attacks, but they had never seen anything like this. What are our options? Richard asked. Jack Morris, head of operations, spoke up. We've confirmed that Heather Boyd and Greg Miller have known each other for years. There are photos of them together at social events. This wasn't a random incident. She deliberately removed Ms. Washington to give her seat to a friend. Have we fired her yet? Richard asked. Yes, both Heather and Sam Peters have been terminated. But it's not enough, Linda said. People are digging into our history now. Journalists have found 27 similar complaints from the past 5 years, all involving minority passengers. We settled most of them quietly. Richard put his head in his hands. Why wasn't I told about this pattern? No one answered. They all knew why. No one had wanted to acknowledge the problem. Our legal team is advising a careful, measured response, Linda continued. They want us to issue a brief apology and let the story die down. Richard looked up, his face showing the strain of the crisis. And what do you think, Linda? She took a deep breath. I think that approach will kill this company. We need radical transparency. We need to admit what happened, take full responsibility, and show people we're serious about change. The debate went on for hours. By 7 a.m., Richard had made his decision. Against the advice of the legal team, he would record a personal video, apology, and release it immediately. As the Skyline crisis unfolded, Karen Washington woke up to find her phone had died from constant notifications. She plugged it in and was shocked to see over 2,000 text messages and thousands of social media alerts. Her story had gone global overnight. Karen turned on her TV and was stunned to see her own face on the screen. The reporter was saying, in what many are calling a textbook example of how not to handle a crisis, Skyline Airways has lost over $500 million in market value since Karen Washington posted her video 36 hours ago. Karen's brother Marcus called. "Are you watching the news?" he asked. "Yes," Karen replied. "I can't believe what's happening." "The Skyline CEO is about to make a statement," Marcus said. "Turn to Channel 7. Karen switched channels just as Richard Bennett appeared on screen. He looked tired and stressed, sitting at a desk with the Skyline logo behind him. "Good morning," he began. "I am Richard Bennett, CEO of Skyline Airways. I am speaking to you today about the incident involving Ms. Karen Washington on Flight 372 2 days ago." He paused, looking directly at the camera. "What happened to Ms. Washington was wrong. It was discriminatory, it was humiliating, and it goes against everything Skyline Airways claims to stand for. I want to personally apologize to Ms. Washington for this terrible experience." Karen watched in surprise as Richard continued. "Our investigation has confirmed that Ms. Washington was removed from her rightful seat, not because of any overbooking or priority issue, but because a flight attendant wanted to give preferential treatment to a personal acquaintance. Both employees involved have been terminated effective immediately," Richard went on. "But firing 2 employees is not enough. This incident has forced us to look deeper into our company culture and practices. We have discovered a pattern of similar complaints that were not properly addressed. For that systemic failure, I take full responsibility." He announced a series of immediate actions. An independent investigation led by a respected civil rights attorney, mandatory anti-bias training for all 28,000 employees, and a complete review of all customer complaint procedures. "Finally," he said, "I would like to personally invite Ms. Washington to meet with me and our board of directors. We want to hear directly from her about her experience and her thoughts on how we can do better." As the statement ended, Karen's phone rang again. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Hello, this is Karen Washington," she answered. "Ms. Washington, this is Richard Bennett from Skyline Airways." The voice matched the man she had just seen on television. "I meant what I said in my statement. Would you be willing to meet with us?" Karen thought for a moment. "Yes, Mr. Bennett, I would, thank you," he said, sounding genuinely relieved. "I understand if you prefer to have your attorney present." "My brother is my attorney," Karen replied. "He'll be with me." They arranged to meet that afternoon at Skyline headquarters. After hanging up, Karen called Marcus to tell him about the conversation. "Be careful," Marcus warned. "This could be just a publicity stunt to stop the bleeding." "Maybe," Karen said. "But what if it's not? What if this is a chance to make real change?" Across town, reporters gathered outside Skyline headquarters. Employees arrived for work looking nervous. Some wore caps or sunglasses, trying to hide their company badges from cameras. Inside, the crisis team was preparing for Karen's visit. Richard sat alone in his office looking at the latest financial reports. The stock had stabilized somewhat after his statement, but the damage was enormous. Skyline had lost over $500 million in value. Bookings were down 60%. Their reputation was in tatters. His assistant knocked on the door. "Sir, they've arrived. Ms. Washington and her brother are in the conference room." Richard stood up, straightened his tie, and took a deep breath. This meeting could determine the future of Skyline Airways. He needed to get it right. As he walked toward the conference room, he wondered what Karen Washington would be like in person. The woman whose video had cost his company $500 million overnight. The woman who might now hold the key to saving it. He opened the door and saw Karen sitting there looking poised and professional. This was not just about making a public relations problem go away anymore. This was about facing the truth and making things right. "Ms. Washington," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." Karen stood and shook his hand firmly. "Mr. Bennett," she replied, "I think we have a lot to talk about." Karen and Marcus sat across from Richard Bennett and 3 other Skyline executives in the large conference room. The tension in the air was thick. On the wall, a television silently showed financial news with Skyline's falling stock price. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us," Richard said. "I want to start by apologizing again for what happened to you." Karen nodded but didn't speak. Marcus had advised her to listen first. Richard continued, "We've done a full investigation. Heather, Boyd admitted she moved you to give your seat to Greg Miller because he's her husband's friend. There was no legitimate reason. Your ticket was valid. You had every right to be in that seat." "Why didn't the other flight attendant, Sam Peters, stop this?" Marcus asked. Linda Coleman, the PR director, answered, "We've interviewed Sam. He said he trusted Heather's judgment and didn't question her. But we've found 3 other complaints about Sam from minority passengers in the past year." Karen spoke for the first time. "So this wasn't just one bad employee, it's a pattern." Richard looked uncomfortable but nodded. "Yes. We've been going through all customer complaints for the past 5 years. We've found a disturbing pattern of similar incidents. They were handled by different people in different departments. No one connected the dots until now." Nancy Rivera, the CFO, opened a folder. "Ms. Washington, we want to offer you a settlement for your mistreatment. We're prepared to offer financial compensation, lifetime free first-class travel, and—" Marcus raised his hand to stop her. "We're not here to discuss settlements yet. Karen wants to understand what real changes Skyline is making to prevent this from happening to others." Richard nodded. "That's fair. We've already started making changes." He outlined the new policies: anti-bias training for all staff, a new customer complaint system that would flag potential discrimination cases, and an oversight committee led by diversity experts. Karen listened carefully. "Those sound like good steps, but they're all internal. How will passengers know things have changed?" The executives looked at each other. They hadn't thought about that. "What would you suggest?" Richard asked. Karen thought for a moment. "Transparency. Publish regular reports about complaint types and how they were resolved. Create a passenger bill of rights that's given to everyone. Make sure your staff reflects the diversity of your customers." Jack Morris, head of operations, took notes. "These are excellent ideas." The meeting continued for 2 hours. Karen shared her experience in detail, making the executives visibly uncomfortable at times. She described how humiliated she felt being escorted off the plane while other passengers watched. She explained how it affected her professionally, making her miss an important business meeting. As the meeting was ending, Richard made an unexpected offer. "Ms. Washington, we need help to fix our company culture. Would you consider working with us as a consultant on diversity issues? We would value your perspective." Karen was surprised. "I have a job, Mr. Bennett." "Of course, this would be a paid advisory role, meeting quarterly with our board. You could help hold us accountable for the changes we're promising to make." Marcus raised his eyebrows at Karen. This was an interesting turn. "I'll think about it," Karen said. Outside Skyline headquarters, reporters were waiting. Karen and Marcus walked out together, facing a wall of cameras and microphones. "Ms. Washington, did Skyline offer you a settlement? Are you planning to sue the airline? What did the CEO say to you?" Marcus stepped forward. "My sister had a productive meeting with Skyline executives. They acknowledged the discrimination she experienced and have committed to making meaningful changes. We have no further comment at this time." As they drove away, Karen checked her phone. Her original video now had over 20 million views. Thousands of people had shared similar experiences with Skyline and other airlines. Civil rights groups were calling it a watershed moment for addressing discrimination in the travel industry. "What do you think about their offer?" Marcus asked. Karen sighed. "I don't know. Part of me thinks I should just take a settlement and put this behind me. Another part feels responsible to make sure they actually change." "It's not your responsibility to fix their company," Marcus said. "I know, but I have their attention now. I could really make a difference." Back at Skyline headquarters, Richard met with his board of directors. The mood was grim. How bad is the financial situation? Asked Harold Simpson, the board chairman. Nancy put up a slide showing the latest numbers. We've lost just over $500 million in market value. Bookings are down 68%. Corporate clients are canceling contracts. We're looking at potential quarterly losses of $200 million if this continues. Dear God, Harold muttered. We need to cut costs immediately, Nancy continued. I recommend suspending service on unprofitable routes, freezing hiring, and possibly furloughing some staff. The board members nodded solemnly. What about the Washington situation? Harold asked. Is she going to sue? Richard shook his head. They haven't said yet, but I think we have a chance to resolve this positively. She's smart, reasonable, and seems genuinely interested in helping us improve. Can we afford the changes you're proposing? Harold asked. Can we afford not to? Richard countered. This crisis has exposed real problems in our company. If we don't fix them, this will happen again. The meeting went on for hours as they debated cost-cutting measures and reform plans. When it finally ended, Richard stayed behind, staring at the financial projections. $500 million lost because one flight attendant gave preferential treatment to a friend. It seemed unbelievable. His phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Turn on CNN now. Richard found a remote and turned on the conference room TV. Greg Miller, the man who had taken Karen's seat, was being interviewed. I had no idea she was removed from her seat for me, he was saying. Heather told me there was a seat assignment error, and I was being moved to my correct seat. I never would have accepted the seat if I knew someone else was being removed unfairly. Linda texted again. He's lying. We have emails between him and Heather planning this. Richard felt a new wave of anger. The truth was even worse than he thought. This wasn't just a flight attendant making a bad decision. It was a deliberate plan to give preferential treatment to a friend at a black passenger's expense. He picked up the phone and called Karen. Ms. Washington, I have new information about your incident. Greg Miller is on television claiming he didn't know what happened, but we found evidence that he and Heather planned this in advance. They deliberately targeted your seat. Karen was silent for a moment. Thank you for telling me this, she finally said. What are you going to do with this information? The right thing, Richard answered. We're going to release the emails publicly and correct his false statements. No more covering up the truth. After hanging up, Richard called Linda. Prepare a press release with the emails between Miller and Boyd. We're going to set the record straight. Linda sounded shocked. Are you sure? Legal will have a fit. I'm sure, Richard said firmly. $500 million has taught me that hiding the truth costs more than facing it. As night fell, Karen sat in her apartment looking at the job offer from Skyline. It would put her in a position to make real change. But was it the right choice? Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Skyline Airways releases emails showing plot to remove black passenger. Karen opened the article and read the emails. They clearly showed Greg and Heather planning to get Karen's seat days before the flight. They had specifically chosen her seat because it was just one person and would be easy to move. Karen felt a mix of anger and vindication. At least now everyone would know the truth. 6 months passed since Karen's video changed everything. She stood in the lobby of Skyline Airways headquarters, looking at the new sign on the wall. It read, Dignity, respect, and fairness for all passengers. Beneath it was a framed copy of the Passenger Bill of Rights that Karen had helped create. Today was an important day. Karen adjusted her red blazer and checked her watch. In 10 minutes, she would address the board of directors for the first time as the head of Skyline's new passenger advocacy office. A lot had changed in 6 months. After Skyline released the emails between Greg Miller and Heather Boyd public, opinion began to shift. People appreciated the company's honesty. Richard Bennett's decision to be completely transparent against the advice of his legal team had surprised everyone. Karen had accepted the consulting role with Skyline, but on her terms. She insisted on having real power to make changes. The board had agreed, seeing it as a way to rebuild trust with the public. 3 months later, They offered her a permanent position leading a new department focused on passenger rights and fair treatment. Leaving her marketing career had been a difficult decision, but Karen felt called to this new path. Her experience had shown her how one person could create meaningful change. Upstairs, Richard Bennett was preparing for the board meeting. The past 6 months had been the most challenging of his career. Skyline had survived, but not without pain. They had cut routes, sold planes, and laid off staff. Over 4,000 employees had lost their jobs. The financial loss had grown beyond the initial $500 million. By the time things stabilized, Skyline had lost nearly $800 million in value. They were only now beginning to recover. Nancy Rivera, the CFO, entered Richard's office with the latest financial reports. "Good news for once," she said. "Bookings are up 20% from last month." Richard nodded. "How do we compare to where we were before the crisis?" "We're still down about 30% from last year, but the trend is positive. The new customer service policies are getting good reviews. People are starting to trust us again." "And the lawsuit?" Richard asked. "Settled last week. Most plaintiffs accepted our offer." After Skyline released the emails, journalists had found more people who experienced similar discrimination. 23 passengers joined a class action lawsuit against the airline. Rather than fight it, Skyline had offered a fair settlement and a public apology. Richard checked his watch. "It's time for the board meeting. Is Karen here yet?" "She's waiting downstairs. Jack is bringing her up." Richard gathered his papers. Today's meeting would determine Skyline's future direction. Some board members wanted to cut the new passenger advocacy programs to save money. Richard and Karen would have to convince them that these changes were essential, not optional. As Richard walked to the boardroom, he reflected on how much his thinking had changed. Before Karen's video, he had been focused only on profits and growth. Now he understood that treating people with dignity was not just the right thing to do. It was also good business. Downstairs, Jack Morris greeted Karen. "Ready for the big meeting?" he asked. Karen nodded. "I'm ready." They took the elevator to the top floor. Karen thought about how strange life could be. 6 months ago, she had been humiliated and removed from a Skyline flight. Now she was helping to reshape the company's culture. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Knock 'em dead, sis." Karen smiled. Marcus had been skeptical when she took this job, worried that Skyline was just using her for public relations. But over time, he had seen the genuine changes she was helping to create. The elevator doors opened, and Jack led Karen to the boardroom. Inside, 12 people sat around a large table. Richard stood at the head. "Ah, here she is," Richard said. "Everyone, I believe you know Karen Washington, our new director of passenger advocacy." Karen took her seat at the table. Harold Simpson, the board chairman, spoke first. "Ms. Washington, we've reviewed your proposal for expanded passenger advocacy programs. While we appreciate your vision, some of us have concerns about the cost. We've already lost significant revenue this year." Karen had expected this. "I understand your concerns, Mr. Simpson, but these programs aren't just about doing the right thing. They make business sense." She displayed slides showing customer feedback on the new policies. Satisfaction scores had improved dramatically. Complaints were down. Repeat bookings were up. "What happened to me 6 months ago cost this company $800 million, Karen said. "How much would it have cost to treat me with respect in the first place? Nothing." The room was quiet. Karen continued, showing data from other companies that had invested in similar programs. Fair treatment isn't an expense. It's an investment in your brand. For the next hour, Karen answered questions from the board. Some were supportive, others skeptical. Richard watched with admiration. Karen was persuasive, confident, and knowledgeable. She was exactly what Skyline needed. Finally, Harold called for a vote on Karen's proposals. One by one, the board members voted. The final tally was 9 in favor, 3 against. "Congratulations, Ms. Washington," Harold said. "Your proposals are approved." After the meeting, Richard walked Karen to her office. "That was impressive," he said. "You won over some tough critics today." "It's just the beginning," Karen replied. "We still have a lot of work to do, Her new office had a view of the airport runway. Karen watched planes take off and land, thinking about all the people inside them. Each person deserved to be treated with dignity, regardless of their race, gender, or background. Now she had the power to help make that happen. Her assistant brought in a package. "This just arrived for you." Karen opened it and found a framed copy of her original boarding pass for Flight 372, the flight she had been removed from. Attached was a note from Richard, a reminder of where this journey began. Karen placed the frame on her desk. It would serve as a daily reminder of why her work mattered. That evening, Karen was invited to speak at a civil rights conference. She shared her story with hundreds of people, explaining how one moment of injustice had led to meaningful change. "What happened to me was terrible," she told the audience. "But the response has been powerful. One company is changing its culture. Other airlines are following their lead. My experience has started conversations about how we treat each other in public spaces." After her speech, a young black woman approached Karen. "Thank you for speaking up," she said. "I had a similar experience last year but stayed quiet because I didn't think anyone would listen. You gave people like me a voice." Karen felt tears in her eyes. This was why she had chosen this new path. Later that night, Karen checked the latest news about Skyline. Their stock price had increased 5% after announcing the new passenger advocacy programs. A financial analyst was quoted saying, "Skyline has turned a crisis into an opportunity to lead the industry in customer relations." Karen smiled. The company that had lost $500 million overnight because of discrimination was now gaining value because of inclusion. As she looked out her apartment window at the city lights, Karen thought about how one small action could create a ripple effect. She had simply recorded a video sharing her experience that led to millions of people speaking up, a company changing its practices and an industry rethinking its approach to customers. Karen's phone rang. It was Richard. "I just wanted to thank you again for today," he said. "The board is fully on board now." "I'm glad," Karen replied. "It's been a long 6 months." "It has," Richard agreed. "But we're building something important here, something that will last." Karen thought about all the people who would fly on Skyline planes in the years to come. They would never know her story, but they would benefit from the changes it had created. Sometimes, justice came in unexpected ways. Sometimes the path to change began with one person saying, "This is not right, and I will not be silent."